Hi, I'm Princess Senate, conference producer at Technology Networks, and I am here to introduce our final talk of the day, Change Management with Gen Z. I am pleased to welcome Sean Tucker, the Director of Laboratory Services at North Kansas City Hospital in Kansas City, as your speaker today. Sean holds a Bachelor of Science in Clinical Laboratory Science and Molecular Biotechnology from the University of Kansas Medical Center. He furthered his education with a Master's in Business Administration with a healthcare emphasis from Rockhurst University. Sean is also a highly active member of the American Society of Clinical Pathology and was recognized by the ASCP with the prestigious 40 Under 40 Award in their inaugural ceremony in 2014. A warm welcome to you, Sean. Following the presentation, we will also have a Q&A session, and we welcome any questions that you may have. So please ask questions using the Q&A system to the right-hand side of the video player. And without further ado, I will now hand over to Sean to begin his presentation.
Princess, thank you so much. I am honored to have the privilege to present to you today for Modern Lab Leader 2024. I was thinking originally about the topic itself and focusing on our newest generation in the workforce and how to lead change management. But with the amount of staffing challenges that we are approaching in our workforce, it's pretty soon that Generation Z will be in those leadership positions. And so I kind of wanted to turn that focus a little bit, still discussing change management and how to be effective as leaders in the laboratory. But I wanted to focus across the four generations. So I've kind of changed the title a little bit to generational leadership, being a leader of generation across the four generations that we're seeing in our laboratory. So let's have a little discussion today. You can kind of see where I'm coming from based upon the image on your screen with the skinny jeans. You can kind of tell I'm a little bit of a millennial here. So just to put some frame and context there. But we'll kind of go through, the designations that we see across the workforce. And of course, I always have to start with the caveat that no one fits into one square or circular hole, but we are complex beings with stories across our lifespans that certainly make this a little bit more complex. And so we'll kind of go through some tools, techniques that I use to help lead across generations. Just to quickly start out, I do not have any disclosures to share. So again, kind of generalizations around generational differences that we are seeing in the workplace, and really to better understand the team that you're working with and what you are trying to accomplish. So currently in our workforce, we see four different generations working on the bench, working with us in our quality management programs, certainly across our institutions and organizations. Those include our close to retirement workforce of the baby boomers. Certainly after that, the Generation X, millennials, and again, there are overlapping areas for each one of these generations. And then our newest generation in the workforce, Generation Z, all currently coexist in today's organizations and workplace. Each of these generations certainly provides value to your mission, to your work, and to your productivity. And together they provide multiple perspectives and a variety of problem-solving skills. This creates opportunities for mentoring. And as we do mentor the next generation of scientists and technicians, it's important that we share that knowledge, certainly across generations, those experiences, that background, so that you're not left with brain drain when your younger generation of the workforce is taking over. Employees are tasked with understanding and managing these different cohorts, the expectations they have and needs, delivering a workplace experience and its benefits that helps keep these teams engaged. One example that I just saw in my own organization is having more transparency and certainly self-ownership over pensions and retirement packages. And so they are doing a special, what they call pension buyout plan, because older employees wanted more flexibility in how they could invest their pensions. And so instead of a conservative pension plan accruing at a particular interest rate, our staff wanted more you know, authority over how they invest their money. And so these are the things that our human resources department is doing by listening, understanding what the workforce wants, and trying to make these changes to empower them, but also to create creative workplaces that allows them to stay and share that knowledge. So today's leaders are experiencing the rewards and challenges of managing all four of these generations with very different ideals, mindsets, stories, and backgrounds. It's a challenge, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. So, like any situation, whether it's parenting or leading in the workplace, we certainly have to start with ourselves. Sometimes we've heard of this called emotional intelligence or emotional IQ. We need to start by self-realization and understanding who we are, where we come from, what our background and opportunities have been, and then start there in order to be appropriate or prepared leaders. That certainly starts with self-awareness. Questions you can ask yourself: are you aware of your limitations? Are you aware of your weaknesses? And what are your strengths as a person, a scientist, or as a leader? Self-development is incredibly important in our career field. We are continual learners in the scientific community. And so we want to make sure that we are taking time to develop personally, emotionally, scientifically, in several of these opportunities. We also need to be able to manage not just those who work with us, but ourselves as well. Are you managing your time, your energy, the capacity that you have to participate in your organization or outside of your organization? And certainly, are we managing our emotions along the way? Self-esteem. Do you appreciate the effort that you exude in your role? Even when the outcomes maybe not are what you expected them to be, are you still giving yourself some grace and some congratulations for at least trying? So self-esteem is important as you grow as a leader. And then lastly, self-actualization. What are we doing in order to help ourselves reach our full potential? How can we transcend these fears or challenges that we have to transcend as leaders and truly help our teams get through change and also want to participate in goal setting and accomplishing these goals? So there are a few different tools out there that I have used in the past. One of them being the Strengths Finder. The Strengths Finder model by Gallup is a great opportunity. It's a very short read. If you purchase this book, this material for your team, there is a Strength Finder quiz at the end that helps them understand, the strengths that they have, as well as others on the team. And so they kind of put these into certain categories, but as you see with this model, this circular model, where you land based upon your preferences in Strength Finder, you are not going to be in just one category. You're going to be hovering over 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 categories of where your motivation comes from, how you connect with individuals, where do you regroup and find your energy. These are going to be different for all team members, but first understanding yourself and then being able to compare your strengths versus those of your team will help understand how you build teams, who is going to be responsible for what, and where you can lean on each other for better outcomes. One other tool that I've used in the past is the DISC model. This is looking at your personal preferences, specifically for how you communicate with others effectively and how you effectively also receive communication. And so there are, again, this circular format. No one fits into one particular quadrant. We are overlapping with several different complex situations. So it's important to know, again, where you're coming, and then also being able to compare that with where your team is coming. I've used this in the past to allow others to see how their teammates prefer to be communicated with, whether that's direct communication, maybe using an SBAR system of communication, or whether it's to be able to communicate with a little bit more compassion, maybe to tell a story behind it, showing emotion or why somebody has particular preferences. And so this is certainly a tool that can be used to help better understand how you communicate with others, as well as how you like to receive communication. And one last model is the SDI model. It assesses to help people see their motives in light of their relative focus on three critical business priorities. So certainly the people in your organization, helping them develop, the performance of the organization, directing action and achieving results, and then lastly, the process, establishing clarity and meaningful order. The SDI model can be very beneficial when used appropriately through change management. All right, so after you have your self-realization, you better understand how you perceive others, communicate and receive communication most effectively, then it's time to practice it, finding common ground in those around you. Certainly finding common ground with those who you hope to lead, and specifically lead through change. So interests and aspirations that two parties share when researching, try to find a common link or common ground with both of your backgrounds. Did you go to the same school? Do you share the same skill set or love for microbiology? Or do you know anyone that's in common, right? Across our networking communities. These are all great places to start. So finding common ground and being able to tell your story will create an opportunity of comfort to where they will also share their story and develop trust between your relationship. Building trust is one of those foundations that you need in order to lead through change. And being able to be open, be a little bit vulnerable, express your story so they understand where you're coming from, will give you an opportunity and a pathway to build trust by finding common ground. After that, start paying attention. Identify clues across your team and your workforce. Not everyone is open in terms of sharing their thoughts, emotions, concerns, or ideas, but those things are shared meaning, right? These are experiences that people have, and they should feel comfortable sharing them. When we do that together as a team, we call that a pool of shared meaning, and that pool needs to continue to grow. So by being aware, by being open, again, slightly vulnerable, and making sure that you give everyone an opportunity to share their meaning will create successful dialogue where you'll have results when everyone feels safe to add their meaning, again, to the shared pool of meaning. These could be views of the team and views of the team's workflow. Certainly, they are an individual's experiences with that team and that team's workflow. But when these views and experiences are shared, we can better understand the workplace culture, the environment, and if there is some sort of hesitation or impedance from them being able to participate and share their shared meaning, to you as a leader, we want to break down those barriers in order to be most successful when trying to lead change. All right. So again, we see 4 generations currently working in the workforce, and each generation certainly can have their own priorities, but I want to be very specific and remind everyone we don't fit into one single category. We are complex humans, we are smart individuals, we have our own story, our own experiences, and we have our own traumas as well that can define what our priorities are and who we are as individuals and how we act in the workforce. So although we will show some generalizations of each area or each generation, please note that the experiences that they have lived through are going to vary from baby boomer to baby boomer and from millennial to millennial. And so we have to keep an open mind and make sure that we are not categorizing all individuals of one age range into a small box. We are complex and we are too smart for that. But something to consider are the years that led to the growth and the expertise of a group of individuals from the baby boom generation born between 1946 and 1964. Some of those ideals that, can be categorized are they were quite optimistic about progress post World War II. They were certainly competitive in the workforce, competitive in school. They worked constantly. Some might say they were workaholics or, work till you die. But they were also team oriented. They focused on in-person group team projects and were quite successful in doing so. But there were several things that happened during this time period that could have shaped their behavior, whether it was the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, that certainly changed politics here in the United States. Another thing that happened in the United States through Watergate and the Nixon administration. These sort of things changed how this particular generation saw the world, saw its country, and certainly saw its workforce. Things they might have been motivated by are company loyalty. This generation certainly sees more individuals that stay with the organization over the long term, as opposed to what we'll see in some younger generations where they are moving from employer to employer. Again, they focused on work, teamwork, and their duty to the organization or their duty to their work. Some of the communication styles that can be effective, whatever is most efficient, certainly, but relying on phone calls and face-to-face interactions. And their worldview certainly was categorized by the events that took place, but that achievement comes after paying one's dues or giving or sacrificing for success and for achievement. So the baby boomer population can be seen as committed to climbing the corporate ladder and working long-term for one employer, that no more rules for the sake of having rules, but that it makes sense to them. Expect everyone to perform up to a particular standard. Certainly, they fight for a cause. We saw that through the civil rights movement, and they work to live, meaning they were committed to the work that was being done. They sacrificed, put in their duty, and hope to be thanked for that. Tips for leading baby boomers in the workplace. Be open and direct. Direct communication, face-to-face, is probably going to be your most optimal way of communicating. Show them by using charts, graphs, and certainly historical or stories that can help comprehend. Answer questions with detail. Avoid controlling or manipulative language. They can certainly see through that very quickly through their experience and expertise. Present options to show flexibility in the way you think, the way you can do things, and how change can occur. It's probably not been their first time experiencing a particular type of change. So that's where their information, their background can be very helpful through change management. Face-to-face over electronic communication. Be formal sometimes, but certainly always continue to show respect for their wisdom, for their experience, and acknowledge their expertise. Surround yourself by their expertise. They need to be able to share that expertise before retirement so that, again, we are not left with a vacant hole of our younger workforce missing that experience, that background, and that knowledge. Remind them to work smarter, not harder, and of course, always give recognition. Generation X came later, between the years of 1965 and 1980. They're thought to have been flexible, maybe more informal than previous generations, a little bit skeptical of authority, certainly, and more independent than previous generations. They were shaped by the AIDS pandemic, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the dot-com boom and the introduction of the internet. Things that motivate some of Generation X. Diversity became more apparent in the workforce. Balancing work-life, especially with the growth of families, that their personal and professional interests are of importance more so than what the company's interest is. So that's where you start to see that change in company loyalty, start to shift with Generation X. Communication style, again, whatever is most efficient. Phone calls, certainly face-to-face. They started to see a little bit of that change regarding early adoption of the internet and email services. And so that's going to be common communication styles for Generation X. And then their worldview was focused on changing diversity, quick to move if their employer fails to meet their needs. Again, there's where you're starting to see that slight change in organizational loyalty. Resistance to change at work if it affects their personal lives. Again, this is where we start to see the introduction of that life-work balance, kind of changing the way we look at how what an employee needs from their organization. Loyalty's definition is different than baby boomers, certainly. They tend to be more entrepreneurial and want to work for themselves, want people to get to the point quickly, and they would prefer a little bit more autonomy and flexibility in the work that they're doing. And this generation has been seen to show more flexibility and adaptation to new technologies. Ways to lead Generation X, some tips there. Let them help find shortcuts along the way, find ways to do things faster. We saw productivity increase dramatically with this generation in the laboratory setting. They want to multitask. Again, they want to find a quicker way of performing testing and getting things done. Certainly take advantage of their ability to make those quick decisions. Again, introduction of email during this generation. And so they use that as a primary communication in the workforce. Sharing information immediately and often. They want you to circle back. If you have something that needs to be communicated or a decision that needs to be made, they want that information to be shared. Again, we see the introduction of work-life balance, encouraging entrepreneurship, and also share information and feedback often. All right. Millennials, born between the years of 1981 and 1996, tend to be competitive. They are both civic and open-minded with more of a worldview. They are achievement focused or achievement oriented. Some of the things that certainly shaped some millennials, at least in the United States, was the Columbine shooting, September 11th, and the really explosion of the internet and how that changed, not just for our work, but also for our social lives as well. They're motivated by responsibility. They want a high quality manager or leader to lead them. And they're also looking for more unique work experiences. Communication style, instant messenger was adapted during this generation, a lot more texting. Certainly I can speak to that. And then also email is a primary communication method as well. So their worldview is seeking challenge and growth and development. They want fun in their work-life balance. Again, that continues to grow with this generation and likely to leave an organization if they don't like the changes that are happening. So lofty goals, but they're not always sure how to achieve those goals. Want constant feedback, certainly work smarter, not longer. They want attention. They want to make sure that they're achieving goals and that they are being recognized for that as well. Sometimes they want that gratification instantly, but they're also very adaptive when it comes to new technologies. And so certainly some very positive things coming as well. Some tips for leading. They don't want to be talked down to like their parents did. Create steps that they feel like they're moving in the right direction. Again, they want to see growth and opportunity. Give frequent feedback and using email or text messaging as a primary method of communication. Taking advantage of multitasking abilities and new technology strengths. So they want to be recognized for being able to be adaptive to new technologies. That might be where their roles and responsibilities are during this change. You'll see more introduction of humor, certainly being less formal in the workplace. We start to see, a lot more tattoos and piercings, certainly with this generation, and let them work with older team members. I think this is important because, again, this is your opportunity to transfer that information, find out where each other's strengths are, certainly between the science and knowledge versus the technological skill sets, and where you can see some really good dynamics working together. And then finally, Generation Z, born between 1997 and 2010. This is our younger generation in the workforce. Certainly, they are seen having kind of more of a global or entrepreneurial focus. They tend to be a little bit more progressive than previous generations, but they're also slightly less focused. And I think that's the introduction of the technologies that have basically lived beside them their entire lifetime. So, things that have shaped them are certainly, post September 11th, the Great Recession that happened to the economy, and just the access to technology at a young age. They're motivated by diversity, personalization, individuality is important, and certainly that creativity is something that they've come to know. This generation has grown up with social media and certainly text and instant messenger. That's probably going to be their primary method of communication. So things to think about when managing the workforce and helping them with change is how you're going to communicate with them and in which ways. So their worldview is seen as self-identifying. They can be addicted to their digital devices. That's something you have to think and manage within the workforce. But they also want to be independent and show their individuality. You see this with current clothing styles as well as piercings and other things. They're trying to express their individuality, and they prefer to work with younger managers. They can be innovative and very adaptive to new technologies. So they tend to want to multitask, expect very quick responses, and constant stimulation. More accepting of people's differences is a more kind of progressive generation, certainly, but prefer a coaching style of leadership. They expect fast promotions that aren't always available, which may lead them to wanting to leave and change organizations, but they are quite technologically reliant. Just to kind of close off for tips about leading Generation Z, certainly be a servant leader and lead by example. They're going to be paying attention to you. They want you to respond quickly and give quick feedback. They like their independence and autonomy, but you have to pay close attention to that as they're still learning in the workforce. Empathize with mental health needs. With the pandemic, we have seen an increase in mental health needs across the workforce. This has certainly hit our younger generations. It's something that we have to pay attention to. We have to find and look out for signs and be able to provide them with the resources needed to help them get through those stages. Work-life balance is certainly important, as well as inclusivity, and certainly appreciating their opinions and making sure that their ideas are being valued. And so we are starting to see all four of these generations participate in change, and certainly beginning to participate in leadership opportunities as well. I think one thing for leaders that it's incredibly important is to appreciate the intelligence around you. Certainly in the healthcare community, in the science community, we have many intelligent individuals. It is important that we put down our egos, surround ourselves by them, and allow them to help empower what we do, empower the change that's occurring, and utilize their strengths in order to do so through appreciating their intelligence. I think we need to do so by being humble, being empathetic, and focusing on three types of empathy. One is the emotional empathy, or the ability to feel what someone else is feeling. It's important for effective mentoring and managing clients, reading through dynamics. Trauma-sensitive care is one language that we use in healthcare about emotional empathy. It's to relate what another person needs. So what are their needs? Empathetic concern is another of one of the empathy triads. Empathetic concern is the ability to sense what another person needs from you as a leader. It is emotional empathy while also knowing what their needs are. This is what we expect from our doctors when we're having a doctor's visit. It's also what my wife expects from me when I get home. It is the sense of what another person is feeling. Again, that's empathetic concern. Oops, excuse me. And lastly, cognitive empathy, the ability to understand another person's perspective, Cognitive empathy enables leaders to explain themselves in meaningful ways. It allows you to think about feelings rather than just to feel them directly. Again, you need to be able to separate yourself from that. So cognitive empathy allows a leader to comprehend another person's perspective. And I think this is incredibly important, not just across generations, but also in the diverse work environments that we're trying to lead. Taking time for face-to-face interaction is incredibly important for several reasons. We have to understand how we communicate most effectively, the fact that we're continuously coaching what those expectations are during change, and of course, being active listeners. So we want to share our purpose in the conversation, the background and history or the goals and desired behaviors that we want to see through this change, and how important that impact or those expectations are. Secondly, then we listen to individuals. You want to ask them, what have you done so far? What is getting in the way of this change? And trying to make sure that you are hearing them by paraphrasing what you have heard them say. So what I think you're trying to say is this, and making sure that we are actively listening. Then the two of you or you and your team will explore what do we know for sure? What are the facts of the situation? And what can we do about it? How can you help as their leader by understanding their ideas, again, their strengths, what yours are, and then being able to discuss consequences if it were not to work out that way, exploring opportunities through getting through the change, and then finalizing by agreeing to summarizing what you have just decided, your action plans in terms of where you're going with this change, what will you do as the leader, and by what time, and set up meetings to follow up on progress. It's important that you close that loop and express confidence in them before they leave, so they know that they can accomplish these tasks, and then that you're going to meet up with them and review and validate. Lastly, motivation is incredibly important. We want to motivate individuals to accomplish their goals because they want to, not because they were told to. And you can co-create goals together, checking in on progress, making sure that they have the tools to be successful, and recognizing them for that success. Taking risks is incredibly important, especially through great change. We take risks certainly in our lives, some more than others. I know that I've taken several risks through my career where I wasn't always sure what might happen on the end. But if we can focus on these types of leadership techniques through self-understanding, building of emotional IQ, coming up with good coaching methodologies, and really understanding the diverse workforce that we live in to motivate individuals, in a most effective manner, we're going to be able to see our organizations being more adaptive, being more productive, and certainly seeing positive outcomes. Sometimes you have to show that in a value-based navigation. So knowing how to effectively navigate conflict based upon the values of your organization, we'll have to make decisions based on productivity by asking, what is the ultimate goal? How much time do we need to give to this? What do we need to prioritize? A leader will live the values and mission of the organization, not just inside, but also outside of the institution. And that's incredibly important. We need to help guide our staff and our teams towards the best outcomes for the institution itself. And then providing feedback. Feedback is incredibly important. All generations want feedback. They may want that feedback differently, but it's important that we help communicate that with clear expectations and timelines, making sure your receiver knows the difference when you communicate constructive feedback versus punitive feedback or discipline. That should never be a surprise because you're constantly looping them in and providing it. Annual reviews, when you're looking at an annual review for someone's job performance, you need to make sure that there are no surprises. You should have already had these follow-up discussions on issues through documented coaching conversations. And don't sandwich your constructive feedback with a compliment and then try to give them something important for their behavior or expectations, and then sandwich the back end with another compliment. that information will get lost between there. So be direct, straightforward, and document your conversations. And then lastly, set up goals together before your review time. Again, so that there's no surprises when it comes to those annual reviews. Lastly, I like to focus on a leadership style that I learned in school called servant leadership. Some of the themes in servant leadership are having a calling, that your employees believe you will sacrifice self-interest for the good of the group or the organization or your team, being an active listener, making sure that your employees believe that you want to hear their ideas and value their ideas. Leading with empathy is incredibly important, as we discussed earlier, that healing can occur within the workforce as well. That do they come to you when their chips are down or when there's something difficult happening? Can they come to you openly and trust you that you'll support them? Being aware, do others believe you have the strong awareness for what is going on? And certainly the foresight and the confidence in your ability to anticipate the future and consequences that this change will mean to your organization. Leaders need to be persuasive. They should be able to help motivate teams, again, through change because they want to, not because they're told to. And of course, be good stewards. Do others believe that you as a leader are doing the work to make a positive difference? The last few are kind of focused on growth, that you're wanting to help them grow, that you believe in them, and that you're recognizing for their growth in the workforce. And conceptualization. Do others communicate their ideas and vision for the organization when you are around? And so how are you engaging your teams to be part of some of that change? And so servant leadership is something that I certainly have focused on. All of you can look into this and see if that is a model that would be successful for you as a leader in your teams. But we have a huge challenge coming up. And this challenge is a projected professional shortfall. So this just in the United States, the American Society of Clinical Pathology Vacancy Survey back in 2020 is projecting that over the next decade, we should see a shortfall of 75,000 professionals within just the laboratory itself. This is certainly due to a number of retirements that are coming down the pipeline, but also because of the shortfall in graduates who will be coming into this profession as well. So this is why it's one of the American Society of Clinical Pathology's primary focus areas on building knowledge and understanding of the STEM program of laboratory medicine to make sure that we have more of these younger generations coming into our workforce. But we also have to understand that there's going to be openings, and if not millennials, Gen Z will be taking these leadership roles. If not now, it's going to happen very soon. And so what are we going to do about this shortage? How are we going to mentor this next generation into these leadership roles? And what will we do? What is our responsibility as individuals, as scientists, as leaders to help prepare this next generation? So at this time, I am open to some questions and appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks so much, Sean. That was truly a fascinating talk. You've given us a lot to think about when it comes to managing generational shifts in the workplace. I know we've got a lot of questions from the audience, so let's dive right in. So first up, we've got a question about empowering young professionals. How can we give them a sense of ownership over change while also managing their workload?
Yes, again, I think it starts with a conversation. It's certainly you want to get to know the individual, what their interests are, again, because you want them to take opportunities for growth and change that interest them. And so by starting with a conversation and story and opening a dialogue of trust will get you to realize clues about that individual, what their interest is, and what motivates them. And then start there and allow them to grow and guide them through that, help push them a little bit, find out what makes them slightly uncomfortable, and then prepare opportunities where they might challenge themselves through that change or through achieving those goals. And again, focus on those different types of communication, that follow-up, try to get an understanding of what kind of feedback or follow-up that they need, and then continue to round on that. Be present, be focused, and be an active listener.
Solid advice, Sean. So this next question is a little bit of a tricky one. How do leaders balance change transparency with the pressures of administration withholding sensitive information until the last minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I recently went through this with the implementation of a new cancer center. And there's only so much information that can be provided before they make a public announcement. But there's so much detail in the operational components behind all of that that leaders need to prepare for. And so there is certainly proprietary or some confidential information that leaders can't share with their teams. But what's important for us is to understand from our leaders or our bosses what we can and cannot share with our teams so that we can remain to be as transparent as possible throughout this change. If we can just provide little nuggets of information that help not just prepare our teams, but create some comfort to this change that's upcoming, while understanding that in the background, we might need to be thinking about these several different checklist items that have to be completed in order for this all to be successful. The politics of organizations can be complicated, and you certainly need to have a clear expectation and understanding of what you can and cannot share with your team, but try to be as transparent as you possibly can.
That's a great point. I mean, transparency is key, but sometimes we have to be strategic about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I am aware of the time that we have left, so we must move on. And I wanted to talk about the technological side of things now before we end this session. So looking ahead, AI has had some significant growth in the last few years, and it's clear that AI is rapidly transforming workplaces. So how do you see AI shaping future changes in the lab environment, and how can we prepare our staff for this technological shift?
Absolutely. Again, I go back to that number, 75,000 shortfall of professionals within our workforce over the next decade, and that's just in the United States. AI needs to be part of that solution. We've already seen the introduction of automation within the laboratory industry, and I think we have adapted to that very well. And so this is just going to be another tool for us to utilize within the workforce. There are opportunities certainly in areas like hematology and cellular identification that we have been using with some of the vendors out there already. That's going to continue to adapt. I think we're going to start to see this transform in anatomic pathology as well. They are also seeing a shortfall of pathologists across organizations as well as cytologists across organizations that will be able to use digital imaging and artificial intelligence to help prioritize patient care and focus on what type of patients need to be identified or reviewed first. And so creating efficiencies within anatomic pathology. And then I think later down the line, as some of the larger health informatics management programs begin to expand and utilize artificial intelligence to look back through patient records, and then based upon the rules that then are built based upon diagnostic codes and reporting, we're going to start to see a little bit more integration in how we analyze results or changes in results within our work based upon the entire history of that patient. So if you can imagine a patient that had genetic testing performed a decade ago, and then a physician wants to reorder that same genomic testing, we're going to have some techniques that allow us to be able to identify that that is no longer needed, that we need to go back and review that patient's medical record, possibly even across organizations. And so really looking forward to seeing how it can bring efficiencies into the laboratory setting and certainly help our scientists do the work that they're doing, not only in a more efficient manner, but in a safer manner as well. And so that's certainly something to be mindful of, as well as the opportunities for organizations to experience downtimes from IT as well. We're seeing some challenges related to that. And so as we continue to expand our opportunities with technology and computer systems, we also need to be able to keep in mind the vulnerabilities of those systems and be able to protect them from downtime. So.
Yep, That's a fascinating perspective. Yeah, AI looks like it's going to be a game changer for sure. So, but unfortunately, we've run out of time for questions today. So, a big thank you to Sean for sharing his top tips and expertise with us. If your question wasn't answered, don't worry. We will forward all unanswered questions to all of our speakers from today. So, remember, this session, along with all the other talks throughout the day, will be available to watch on demand for the next 30 days. You can access the sessions via the same link you used today. So, that just wraps up this year's online symposium. Once again, a heartfelt thank you to all of our amazing speakers and to all our attendees for joining us. Thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you at our next online event, Advances in Drug Discovery and Development in 2024. Goodbye.